I'm Scott Benson. I'm the manager of resource and transmission planning at Lincoln Electric System. I'm going to serve as your moderator today. With us today, we've got Chad Pinkelman, who is the Sustainable Strategies Consultant at Nebraska Public Power District, and then also Aaron Miller, Energy Division Chief at Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy. Okay, we were supposed to also be joined by a third speaker, Bill Moore, who is the Editor-in-Chief of EV World. Unfortunately, Bill had to get a hold of us about 11 o'clock this morning. His all-electric Nissan Leaf, the 12-volt auxiliary battery had gone dead. And then Bill thought, but I have a backup plan. I have an all-electric Fiat 500e. I'll drive that. And then it dawned on him, I don't have enough range to get to Lincoln with that car. You can't make this stuff up. So Bill can't be here today. So I am also going to fill in as the third speaker and talk a little bit about LES's electric vehicle study. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Chad, and we're going to get started.
Thank you, Scott. So as Scott said, I work for MPPD, and I oversee our electric vehicle and charging station program. I will speak to you a few minutes today about the incentives that MPPD has for electric transportation infrastructure and electric vehicles, and then talk to you about the different charging stations that we've worked with in the past in the state and our future plans and what we're currently working on. So efficient electrification. So efficient electrification in our book is adding load effectively and smartly. So, granted, we don't want to necessarily add much to our peak, but how can we add load, add electricity sales without increasing our grid infrastructure needs? So a couple of our current programs, residential electric vehicle, we have a $4,500 incentive for an EV and a ChargePoint home charger. We have an agreement with ChargePoint to collect all that data. So that's why we currently require that ChargePoint home charger. And right now they are linked. So you have to buy the charger and the electric vehicle to get the $4,500. And again, with all of our incentive programs, you need to be a customer of MPPD or one of our wholesale customers. So unfortunately, LES and OPPD customers aren't eligible. We also have a $500 for just the home charger from ChargePoint. And basically that's for, if you buy a used EV or maybe a plug-in hybrid. And then a residential wiring program. So if you're doing new construction, and in our group, we kind of feel like, putting a plug in your garage for an EV right now is just like putting in, central air. You wouldn't want a house without central air. You wouldn't want a house without a plug for at least a electric vehicle going forward. So it's $200 for new construction. So if it's a new building, it's $200 flat fee to put in a 240 volt outlet or the conduit for that, or 100% up to $400 for existing structures. So, if you have an existing house, you want to buy an EV and you need to rewire your garage, we'll help cover up to $400 of that cost. Then our commercial electric vehicle incentives. So we have through the NET and the Nebraska Community Energy Alliance and the Nebraska Environmental Trust have grants that we help facilitate to different entities in the state, usually our wholesale customers and whatnot. 16K grants for a battery electric vehicle or plug-in hybrids, 100% up to $1,000 for conduit for new construction. So if you're putting in a new hotel, new convenience store or something, we will pay $1,000 for conduit just to be ready for that electric vehicle charger. So we know that in 5 to 10 years, almost everything everywhere is going to need some sort of electric vehicle charging stations. So we will help, cover the cost of that conduit. We also have 50% incentive. We will cover 50% of your out-of-pocket cost for electric vehicle charging stations. So if you say, hey, I'm a hotel and I want to put in a couple level 2 charging stations, we will help cover 50% of that out-of-pocket cost. And then a new program we started this year is 90% for utility-owned charging stations. So if you all know the economics of a DC fast charger, it is high demand yet low utilization. So a car comes and plugs in, pulls 125, 150 kilowatts from that service for 20 minutes and then leaves. So that is low utilization yet high demand. So with demand charges, that can cost quite a bit. So we figure if a utility owns that, they kind of control the demand costs, so they can pay themselves either that demand or defray those costs. So we'll pay up to 90% if the utility's owning it. And then the new program we just started this year is a lawn and garden program. I know from a load perspective, lawnmowers aren't going to be a major load, but our philosophy is if we get people using an electric mower, then hey, it might be a stepping stone to an electric car. It's very nice. We just got my mother-in-law one this summer because she's getting a little old and said she had a hard time pushing her mower across the yard. So we thought, well, let's get her a new mower. Why not an electric, self-propelled? So we got that for her. Now she doesn't have to worry about filling up with gas, changing oil. She unplugs the battery, plugs it in, and is done. So that was a new program just to help transition into electric vehicles. A couple of updates we're doing. Like I said, right now it's a $4,500 incentive for both the car and the charger. We're going to separate that link. So now you can get a $4,000 if you just get the electric car, or $500 if you just get the charging station. You can still do both, but right now that's not a requirement link anymore. And then we're bumping up our lawn and garden to 20%, just to kind of close that cost gap between gas mowers and electric mowers. And yes, we do cover corded mowers as well. So just as long as it's run off electricity, we'll cover it. So like I said, I also oversee our charging station program, DC fast charging updates. So we had several ribbon cuttings this summer: Kearney, Aurora, Norfolk, Auburn, and York. We have taken part or had helped in some of the financing of that, some of the grant funding, piping that grant funds to them in all of those locations. So there, just to update the map, and I have a map here in a little bit showing you where those are, and you kind of see maybe some of the holes that still exist in Nebraska, which we are working on. Like I said, our current plan is we've got 9 new locations that we're looking at putting in. Hebron is a transfer of an NDEE grant that was initially intended for Geneva, so we'll shift that down to Hebron. That's being worked on right now. Wahoo is another one getting worked on. Dannebrog, there's a grocery store that was interested, and like I said, the economic analysis said, it's going to be pretty expensive with that demand charge, so they're looking at putting in a small DC fast charger technically. And then those other locations, Thedford, Shadron, Ainsworth, McCook, O'Neill, and Scotts Bluff, like I said, we're trying to fill some holes to start, and you'll see more holes in the future. So current map, like I said, there's the stars are the ones we're currently working on, those 9 locations. And you can see, there's still further holes in there. And so maybe some of our future locations, we've had some talks with other utilities around Nebraska, and they've said, some of the targets are 50 to 75 miles between DC fast chargers. So that's kind of what we're targeting right now. So some other possible locations: Ainsworth, Alliance, Cody, Merriman, Alma, Oakland, Ravenna, and Cortland. And as long as this. So like I said, those locations are, purple circles. So we're looking at filling some more holes. As you can see, I tell people anywhere off the interstate and west of 81 right now is currently wide open. There's, could you drive a car to Shadron, let's say, from Lincoln and make it? Yeah, maybe, but you'd have to go along the interstate probably the whole way to, say, Ogallala and then straight up. So we're trying to fill some of those holes, and so people feel comfortable, because we believe that we need the charging stations in the field and in Nebraska before people get really comfortable saying, I can get an EV and I can get where I need to go. I believe that's all I have. I'll turn it over there.
Good afternoon. My name's again Aaron Miller, and I'm a section supervisor with the Department of Environment and Energy. And I've worked in our energy program since 2014. I've worked with our state energy plans and programs, our weatherization assistance program, and our waste, litter, and air grants programs as well. So Today, I'm going to talk a little about the state initiatives, incentives, I guess, for charging stations that we've been involved in through last few years. The first program I'm going to talk about is our electric vehicle charging rebate program. And that kind of started back in 2017. We received funds from the Volkswagen Environmental Mitigation Trust Fund. And that's kind of where the program started. So in 2017, there was a court settlement with Volkswagen. The states received funding from that settlement. We received $12.25 million. And those funds were really directed to reducing NOx emissions throughout the state. And Nebraska was actually one of the first states to develop a plan to distribute those funds throughout the state. And actually, Randy Smith, who's here, and Joe Francis are the ones that worked on that plan. So I'll give a little shout out to them since they're sitting here. So, like I said, really the purpose of the program was to reduce NOx emissions throughout the state. So it's broken down. They developed a plan that was broken down into a couple different incentives. About 50% of the funds were used to help schools replace diesel school buses. And then the other funds were used to help replace diesel irrigation equipment and also diesel refuse trucks and transit trucks as well. About 15% of the funds were allocated for the electric rebate charging program. And so that program was really designed to incentivize municipalities and businesses to install level 2 and EV charging station or DC fast charging stations in public spaces and workspaces throughout the state. 28 projects were awarded rebates throughout the state, and that equaled about $1.82 million. Here's a map similar to the map that Chad had with existing charging stations. The green squares are existing DC fast chargers, and then the blue dots are the existing level 2 chargers. And then the stars, the yellow stars, are going to be the pending NDE-funded DC fast charging stations. So you see there's a couple different ones out west, Potter, Nebraska, also down south, Syracuse as well. So kind of all over the state. There's quite a few charging rebates in the Lincoln and Omaha area, obviously. I think over the last year, 15 charging stations were completed, and that included 6 charging stations at Lincoln Public Schools here in Lincoln. So that's good. But like Chad said too, kind of filling in that map so people have a little less range anxiety is kind of the goal, and hopefully we can work moving toward that long term. Here's a couple pictures. So the picture on the left is a facility in York, Nebraska, and that was installed by MPPD. And actually that one has 2 DC fast chargers. So kind of nice if no one else is using the other one. They're actually linked, so you can charge your car pretty fast like that if you use both of them at the same time. The picture on the right is actually the first NDE-funded station that was opened in Stroudsburg, Nebraska, in Polk County. And so that one's a nice station, has a nice little mural in the background that kind of highlights the station and shows it off a little bit too. Here's a chart, and we included, we're not really involved with electric vehicles as far as purchases and stuff like that, but we do collect data on those different types of things throughout the state, different kind of energy resources. So this is the sales of electric vehicles throughout the state of Nebraska. And so on the left, you have the annual sales, and then the right, it's broken down in monthly sales. You have battery electric as the gold lines, and then the green lines is the hybrid electric vehicles as well. So pretty steady throughout 2011 through 2017 for sales in Nebraska. Then you see a pretty big jump in 2018 as far as the number of sales. 2019-20, see a little drop off, but then in 2021 again, quite a big jump in sale of electric vehicles in the state. And you can kind of see in 2021 over half of the vehicles sold are the battery electric. So kind of just interesting data there. So the next program I wanted to briefly touch on is our Dollar and Energy Savings Loan Program. And this is a long-standing program that our agency has administered since 1990. It's used for different type of energy efficiency projects for residential and commercial and agricultural customers as well. But it could also be used to do different types of things like putting in level 2 chargers in your home, or businesses could use it for DC fast chargers as well. So what it really is, it's a low interest way to do these type of projects. And again, for residential customers, businesses, municipalities as well. And it can be used for plethora of different things. So for like a residential home, it can be used to put in insulation. It can be used for heating and cooling systems, windows, and things like that. Over the last few years, we've seen quite an increase in solar loans that we've received, or people wanting to do solar projects. And so I can kind of see in the future, as people adopt more electric vehicles, kind of using the program as a kind of a catch-all, or kind of a whole home type of project where they put in, a bunch of energy efficiency improvements. They could do solar. They could put it in a fast charger or a level 2 charger in their home as well. So that one's a great program, and hopefully we can promote more electric vehicle charging stations in the future with that. It's also done by local lenders, so all that money kind of works for Nebraska businesses and goes through those type of things. So that's kind of the incentives that the state has. So obviously, if you have any questions, you can ask them at the end. But that's all I've got.
Okay, so again, remember, I'm filling in for Bill Moore, and this presentation got put together literally about 15, 20 minutes before the session. So we're all, including me, going to see it for the first time, all right? Okay, so a little bit about LES's EV study. This actually ran for 3 years, 2019 to 2021. We had a little module about the size of a couple packs of gum that plugged into the diagnostic port on those vehicles. It's just like a meter that goes with the car. So let us record when they charged that vehicle, how much energy they consumed, obviously, when they were charging, and because it's GPS enabled, we knew where they were charging that vehicle. We also knew when they drove it, how much energy they were consuming, how many miles they put on it, but the GPS only works when they're charging, so we did not know where they drive the vehicle. All the data is anonymized to LES, so it just comes back as cars. We know who's in the study, but we can't put a person with the vehicle. So since today's session is a little bit about the impacts EVs might have on the grid, I tried to cherry pick some of that information here. So this shows you for all electric vehicles, and this was the full year of 2019. Okay, in 2019, because of the pandemic, we ran a 3-year study, but that was, we feel, the most representative data because it was before all those effects started. That's by make and model for the all electrics. That is the energy consumption across the entire year. The important thing is at the end. On average, the charging energy consumed by those vehicles is equivalent to about 1/4 of an average Lincoln home. Okay, so pretty significant. If you look at plug-in hybrids, okay, that still have a gasoline engine that they leverage, so they don't consume as much energy, still equivalent to about 1/6 of an average Lincoln home. So from an energy consumption standpoint, these are significant loads that you're putting on the grid. But what's more important to us than the energy they consume the entire year is what their peak demand might be. Because remember, that peak demand, their peak consumption, is what drives the facilities we have to build to serve those loads. So this chart shows the actual peak demand for the all electrics by make and model, again, across 2019. And I think if I remember correctly, that average there is about 8 kW. The average Lincoln Homes air conditioner has a demand of 3 kW. If you know anything about the electric utility, you know air conditioners drive just about everything we do. Our peak load usually happens in this part of the country, late afternoon, early evening in July and August. And why is that? Part of it's industry, but a lot of it, air conditioning load. So these are a really big deal when they're on the system. If you look at plug-in hybrids, obviously a lot lower because they have a smaller battery, but still about 4 kW, larger than the average air conditioner. So that peak's important. So what that really leads you to is you got to know, when are these people charging these vehicles? This is a profile by 15 minutes. This is an average from all the different participants in the study. We had about 100 participants in the study. I guess we had 100 applicants. We ended up with a little over 90 participants, which really at the time we launched the study back in late 2018 was a fourth to a third of all the customer-owned electric vehicles in our service territory. So a pretty good cross-section. So you can see there, this is the percentage of those folks charging in any 15-minute interval. And if you look at that, the middle, if you can't make it out, the middle of the chart's about noon. So as most people come home for the day, they're plugging that vehicle in, and the charging just is creeping up throughout the evening until it peaks in the later evening and then goes down overnight. Okay. Now, those people aren't charging every day. We have data on that as well. But when they are plugging in, they're coming home for the day after they've gone to work, done their errands, and they plug in. So that timing is really important. So this is the same chart, but it's just for weekdays in July. Why July? Because July and August, those are the months that we usually hit that summer peak period. And what I've got outlined in red there, that's when we typically peak. So you're in that 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. period. And you can see that I think we're around maybe 20% on average in July, weekdays in July, customers were charging their vehicles, the participants in this study. But we're not really worried about on average when they're charging. What we're really worried about is this. That's the maximum percentage of them charging in any 15-minute interval. Because these people, most of them, they have no idea if it's just a warm day in July or it's going to be our peak electrical day in July. That's not influencing when they charge their vehicles outside of some outside influence from the utility. So now if we look at the maximum, we're up in that 25 to 30% of folks in the study are charging. Now, granted, we only had 90 some folks in the study. What you're trying to do with this data is not worry about those 90 because that load's not really that significant. What you're trying to project out to is what if our service territory had 10,000 of these cars, 40,000 of these cars, and we had those kind of percentages. Now 25 to 30% charging over our peak, pretty significant. So what we did for 2021 is we ran a demand response pilot. So in 6 months out of the year, the 4 summer months, those are pretty easy to tell, June, July, August, September, because that's usually when we're going to hit our peak. But also January and February. For the first time, we chased our winter peak with the program. And this demand response pilot, what we did is we asked customers not to charge their vehicle the next day during a 2-hour period when we thought we were going to hit our monthly peak. They received a text or an email 24 hours in advance. So what I've got for you here is a breakdown from August. We ran 5 demand response events in August, all the exact same time of day, 4:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Why 4:30 to 6:30? Well, because I told you that's about the time of our typical peak, right? So the blue columns there, that is what that load looked like on the 5 days we called the events, okay? 15-minute intervals. The orange, that's the average of all the other weekdays in August that we didn't call an event. And if you look at that, you'll notice that, again, noon's around the middle. So from noon to the left, the blue and the orange, pretty similar, not that big a deal. But as you go into the afternoon hours, you can see no doubt that us asking those folks not to charge, we actually incentivize them. They could earn dollars. For every month that they comply with all 5 of our requests, they could earn $10. There is no doubt during that peak period, we made an impact. I think if I remember correctly, we cut it about in half. So we were somewhere around the 5 to 10% range with the demand response event, and without it, we'd have been in the 10 to 15%. The challenge going forward is now that we know we can have an influence, well, what kind of value do you put on that? Because there's a lot of inherent diversity in when these people charge their vehicles, because they're all just individual people, individual houses. They're charging their vehicle, not worrying about when anybody else is charging their vehicle. So you have a lot of inherent diversity. So did we have an impact? Absolutely. Is it a huge impact? Not huge, right? Hey, great. Instead of having a 15% impact, maybe we went down to 10. What we've got to figure out is how much can we afford to spend on that in order to control that charging? Is it going to be worth it from a cost benefit standpoint? That's all coming forward. And a lot of that hinges on the technology that's available to us to go ahead and interrupt that demand. Because what you'd love to do is not send somebody a text or an email 24 hours in advance. what you'd love to do is just have them sign up for a program where they enabled you to talk directly to their car or their charger and go ahead and interrupt. Thank you very much. That is all I have for you. There's your fill in. All right. At this point, now I got to switch back to moderator mode. As the moderator, God, that third presenter was great, wasn't he? Thank you. Okay, any questions? Anybody's got a question? We got a mic out there. Can we get a mic up here? Thank you.
A couple of questions, if it's not a burden. When you're considering the value for that gap, are you considering kind of long-term value that you don't have to create new generation? I mean, can you delve into that a little more, or is that asking too much of the stand-in?
No, absolutely. I can answer that because you're right on top of that. Why would you get into I have people ask all the time, there's hardly any of these vehicles in your territory, right? I don't think we've hit 1,000 yet based on the latest numbers. So why are you worried about this? We're not worried about the demand those vehicles put on the system because there's just not enough of it. But what you're trying to get to your point, is get ahead of the curve. With air conditioning, a lot of air conditioning was going in and the electric utility industry had to catch up to that. What we're trying to do here is stay ahead of the curve on this. We'd like to start controlling that demand now so that as there are thousands on the territory, it's not a big deal. You just continue with your program. So good question.
And then the follow-up to that is I think more for Aaron in the information I saw there. So I appreciate that you'll be able to sell more electricity without having to build more generation, potentially. It sounds to me from the numbers, Aaron, that you put up on the screen, you put up numbers about car sales. Is that right? But what I'm interested in is percentage of sales. So what's the market penetration? What's the customer adoption rate, or what's the model? And then can the utility or your office influence that adoption rate? So what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I think that's, you definitely want to have, it's not just how many vehicles that are sold. It's obviously, are people looking at, gas powered versus electric? Is that their choice? Or are they just wanting to, if someone wants to buy electric, they're going to go buy an electric, and it's not really someone choosing. So I think, we have a good opportunity to help, provide that infrastructure, to incentivize people, to go purchase the electric vehicles. I don't know if we have a role in influencing like the actual purchase directly, but providing different mechanisms where people are more comfortable having chargers in their homes or, on the road where they can, they don't have to have that anxiety, driving, knowing that there's not a charger available for miles and miles. So I think that's kind of our role, and where we can kind of help push that and hopefully help, incentivize people to, choose more between, gas powered versus electric versus just going out and wanting electric. The people that want electric are going to go buy electric, but having, people really decide between the two and have that be more of a choice.
To speak to the point of the number of vehicles being sold, I think Ford and Chevy have obviously proven that, they are all in an electric going forward in the future. So the belief is that we'll see a much higher percentage of vehicles being sold being electric. So, and to Scott's point about, how do we manage that charging, and there will be charger management going forward so that they're not all charging at the same time. And maybe all the cars are talking amongst one another as well to say, I'll charge now, you charge later, kind of thing.
I have a EV, and I'll go to a charging station. I never know whether I'm going to get charged by the time that I'm there, or whether it's going to be by kilowatt hour, or just what the rate's going to be. And it seems like they're all over the place. I know within PPD, we have the wholesale customers that have different rates. And I'm wondering, is there any kind of a standardized, or are we moving toward a standardized type of charging? And if not, you know, again, it depends. Are you going to have different rates at different times, depending upon what the demand is at the time? Where are you going with that?
Yeah, right now we don't have any kind of standardized pricing. I know my understanding is in Nebraska, only utilities can sell by kilowatt hour. And so, for instance, MPPD, is the headquarters in Columbus, is in Loop Public Power District's service territory. So MPPD cannot sell KWH inside of Loop's territory. And I think we've kind of settled on a per minute basis just so that it's kind of a flat fee and everybody kind of, you could calculate your own. Because if we charge per KWH, then it's like, well, as a consumer, I don't know, is it currently at, on a DC fast charger, currently at 100 kilowatts, or is it currently at 80 kilowatts? They don't know. So, but they could know, well, I'm going to be here for 25 minutes. And so if I'm charged 9 cents a minute, I can calculate that out and I know how much it'll cost me. But yeah, we can, going forward, I think we can maybe start to talk to the other owners of these charging stations and say, hey, do we want to settle on a fixed price across the state? And again, maybe the eastern half of the state has different costs versus the western half. So it's something we'll have to consider.
I was going to say, I'm glad Chad answered that one, because if he didn't, I was going to say, Chad, you're board member, your question. Okay. All right. Do you have any other questions?
This is really not a question, but in response to the percentage of actual EV vehicles, I would think that a way to track it would be through the Nebraska Department of Motor Vehicles to see how many, because I know there's a differential when you go to do your registrations on your vehicles, because I have a sneaking suspicion that we may not be actually selling a lot of them right here in Nebraska, but there are a lot that are being imported into the state that, in other words, residents are bringing them in or whatever else that, are relocating here that drive EVs. So I would think it would be interesting to see if they're actually tracking that kind of information.
Yeah, they are actually tracking that. The problem is because of some confidentiality, you can't always get that information. But they are tracking that, so we got a finger on it. I think we had somebody up here that had a question.
I don't have an electric vehicle, but it's my understanding that they operate quite a bit cheaper than a gas vehicle or diesel vehicle. My question is, has anybody ever decided that maybe the electric vehicles should pay the gas tax that supports our highway funds?
And I suspect that the number is probably low enough now that it's not a huge deal. But like Scott said, as more and more EVs come out there, they're going to realize, hey, we need to bump this up.
I thought I heard yesterday that LES has a off-peak rate and a deep off-peak rate. Does that have anything to do with residential customers, or is that a strategy you're looking at?
So currently those are all industrial, commercial type customers. As we go forward, now that we've got the EV study done, one of the things we're looking to do in the next year is to figure out how would we turn that into a real program. And that could be a lot of things. Like I said, that could be actually talking to cars and chargers directly. That could be offering time of use rates. Now, I think MPPD's actually got
Yes,
new rates
MPPD
they rolled out.
retail does have a time of use rate. I think the super off-peak hours, they call it, but I think it's 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. are the same all year round. Then the on-peak hours change based on summer and winter. I think in the winter, there's 2 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon. And in the summer, it's all 5 hours are in the afternoon. And it's the pricing. It's on our website. If you go to our rates on the mppd.com, I believe, and you can see the difference in pricing for each summer or winter. But yes, we have one, and the main intent was for EV drivers, and so that because they could then program their charger or car to charge at night and be quite a bit cheaper.
Is there any education link in that? Is there a way to tie that either to possibly vehicle registration or through the dealerships so that people who are purchasing these vehicles are aware of them? I mean, I know it's on the website and it's published, but a lot of times people don't necessarily make the connection at the time of purchase?
Right. Yeah. And I believe MPPD is going through a big push, advertising push now to get that out there and that information on to, our customers' faces. And so they see, and then I think we have a calculator as well that you could put in your use, your current usage up every month, and it'll calculate out, okay, I guess I do have an EV. This is what I could save. So.
I don't know. It seems to me like there's a lot of concern about the problems that could be created through the widespread deployment of electric vehicles. But it also seems to me like there's some just amazing opportunities that could be created for utilities with energy storage and the smart grid technology. And where are you guys on that, and how far away is it so that you can look at it? It's not only maybe able to shut off the electric vehicle from charging, but being able to take energy from it when you need it.
That's really the holy grail. That's what you're looking for, right? Not only do we want to try to influence when people are charging, we would like to make use of that asset. A couple of things on that. Right now, if you go back, and it's changing, but if you go back and read the owner's manuals on some of the earlier EVs, they say right in there that you cannot do vehicle to grid with them. That's voiding the warranty. Not something you're seeing changing going forward, but that's a consideration. The other thing you've got is it's one thing to say, hey, I'm going to incentivize you not to charge during the next few hours. Most people, when they've got one of these vehicles, they're putting in charging infrastructure in their home that for their everyday drive, they can get a pretty quick recharge, right? They don't need all night to do it. So they're willing to shift a few hours. That's going to be a different discussion when you say, hey, as opposed to just not charging for the next few hours, I'm actually going to deplete your battery for the next few hours. That's going to cause people to think a little bit as to whether they can recapture that. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but that's going to be one of the real considerations we're going to have to go through as we look at those programs. There is no doubt that is where we would love to head. It'd be great to have all these resources out there that we could draw from at our time of need. It's just going to be a little bit complicated to make sure we can do that and not impede on the customer's home lifestyle.
Right. And to add on to that, the managed charging that I talked about earlier, where maybe cars are talking to one another and scheduling their own charging time. I think that'll all be kind of included in that, charging, demand charging, infrastructure. And so that and I think it'll be all in part of that, they call it vehicle to grid or vehicle to home. So, if it's possible, maybe I come home and my house is a little warm, so I want to kick the air conditioner on, but I'm on that high peak demand time. Could I ask my air conditioner to take power from my car, kind of thing? And so, that'll all be kind of included in that, charging management.
I read an article where Oklahoma was working with co-ops to make sure that they have charging stations within 25 to 50 miles of each other through the entire state. Has Nebraska looked into anything similar to that, or is there greater incentives for those areas that don't have any charging stations in them right now?
Nothing formal yet. I showed on my slide that, one of the targets I heard was always 50 miles. If we can get DC fast chargers within 50 miles of each other, that would be good. Like I said, for me, Western Nebraska, if we could hit 75 miles, that should be enough for most electric vehicles. So we don't have anything formal yet, just to say we need to have a charging station every 25 miles or anything like that. For me, I'm ready to put level 2s practically anywhere. If it makes sense, a level 2, probably doesn't make sense at a convenience store, but maybe at hotels, it does make sense. At schools and parks and whatnot, it does make sense. So, like I said, nothing formal yet, but yeah, we're working to fill a lot of those gaps we saw on the map.
Yeah, I was going to say, David Terry talked about the infrastructure bill this morning, and I think there's going to be a lot of funding for the state that could potentially be used to put in that infrastructure for EV charging stations throughout the state. So I think definitely, fairly soon that will hopefully, be something that we can look at doing and on a state level, helping with those projects.
I wanted to reflect a little bit on the tax payment. So I think rather than the blunt instrument of a flat tax for an EV, I know that some strategies have been about vehicle miles traveled per year. Maybe that's the way to do it. And that's more in line with a gas tax. But the other thing that is missed there is there's no benefit allowed for we no longer have products of combustion and emissions that are like living with a smoker, right? So maybe we could have added insurance payment for like living with a smoker if you drive an internal combustion engine. Just throwing that out there.
Chad wrote that down. I saw him. So he's got it. He's going to work on that. Okay, we probably got time for one more quick question if we've got one. Well, you're going to make our mic guy run all the way to the back.
Back to the use of the battery operated EVs as a source of energy. Usually individual generation sources, utilities require them to be shut off in a power loss event, mainly to protect your linemen and your workers. Would that be something that needs to be addressed as well, as far as using them as a source of energy to backfeed the system if it ever were to go that way, but to make sure that your workers are protected?
Yeah, my assumption would be that in that case, either if you want to power your entire house, like Ford F-150 Lightning had advertised this summer, if you wanted to power your entire house from your vehicle, then you would have to have special equipment that, completely disconnects you from the grid. Whereas I think this vehicle to grid demand charge is like, if there's no grid power, then I will shut off myself. I'm assuming that that's where we'll go with that, is unless you have special equipment that completely disconnects you from the grid. My guess is it'll say if there's no grid power, then I'm not supplying power either.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending, sticking it out today. One more round of applause for Aaron and Chad.